Thank you very much. I think the issue of regional safety net program in South Asia, it was brought out by Vice President Bindumani. It has not yet come into effect. It is a commitment by India in case any countries face balance of payment crisis, that they'll come up with some kind of support to problem countries. But it has not come to effect.
Okay, who wants to respond to the second issue? Chang-Yong, would you like to respond?
Okay. But in general, it's true that if you look at the tariff and non-tariff barriers within Asia, we are actually much higher within ourselves than our tariff rate and our trade positions with advanced economies. I think because we have there are many reasons depending on the countries. One is supply chain. Actually, we are producing very similar goods, and we have some kind of mentality that we want to promote our domestic market and then produce something here and then to export to advanced economies. And by looking at our neighbors, we are producing similar things, so we are protecting each other. And second thing is many Asian economies has a more monopoly in domestic market because of the governance issue and many things. So we are actually more protected than many other compared with other other advanced economies. So this is a real problem. But this has to be changed. I don't think it's going to be easy. But first of all, the first model, we have a similar supply chain, and then so-called factory Asia pattern that we produce here and then export to advanced economies. Sooner or later, it's going to change. And also, if you stick to this pattern, probably we cannot become a more middle-income and high-income countries later. So this pattern, in the long run, has to change. But on the other hand, the second issue, governance issue, and protecting our domestic market for some best interest group, and that is more prevalent in Asia. And this has to be a serious issue, and that we call a governance issue. I will know this problem, and it will take time. And then we really have to try hard to solve this problem.
Maybe just adding one more issue, perhaps foreign firms who may have caused problems in their domestic countries may want to come to Bangladesh to produce garments and apparel. So foreign direct investment from the neighboring countries, from the regional countries, may want to come to use Bangladesh a production platform. So in that way, Bangladesh may be integrated, even though the ultimate markets may be in the United States or Europe. But as China says, as the economy grows, the value content of the products is going to go up. So perhaps countries like Bangladesh may begin to be integrated with the supply chains in higher value-added manufacturing industry. So I think even if the final market is outside, I think still the country has a great potential to work with other neighboring regional economies. Any other comments, questions? Okay, now people are quiet. So why don't I just ask one question? So this issue of confidence and mutual trust was raised, and the lack of confidence and mutual trust can be an impediment to regional cooperation and integration. Now, ASEAN is the most developed organization in terms of regional cooperation and integration, but some ASEAN member countries were even fighting militarily even until the 1970s. So, but now ASEAN countries are working together, and confidence is being built. Maybe Dr. Rilo, you may want to explain how such confidence and mutual trust could be built. And also I'd like to ask other people in your sub-region, what's the source of lack of mutual trust and confidence? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Kawai. I think Dr. Kawai raised a very important issue about having mutual trust and confidence among countries in any regional organization. The advantage of ASEAN is that we have been there for so many years. We were established in 1967, and over the years, officials have been able to establish a certain kind of relationship. Therefore, with this kind of relationship, it becomes a lot easier to come up with more initiatives for the region. Let me cite one very good example. One very good example is the ASEAN surveillance process that we established immediately after the crisis in 1997. Because of this ASEAN surveillance mechanism, we're able to implement a number of initiatives along the way in the areas of financial integration. One very good initiative, for example, is on the bonds market. Another good initiative is on regional development of regional capital market. I think without the benefit of this trust and confidence among countries in the region, we're not be able to really progress a lot. In fact, when I look at going back, I've been involved in ASEAN cooperation since 2000, and I've seen how this relationship has progressed over the years. For example, countries now have become more open whenever we discuss issues in a meeting, unlike I remember in early 2000 where everybody was still trying to be secretive of what to say during the meeting. But because of the fact that countries in the region, ASEAN officials have been meeting regularly over time, we have so many meetings every year, I think that helps a lot in building trust and relationship. And this is something I think that really helps ASEAN in building the ASEAN economic community. Because I think we can't deny the fact that it's a community building process, and at the end of the day, I think what is crucial here is whether relationships have been built over the years. And I think that is something that ASEAN has been able to successfully develop over the years. And the way I look at now, how the various initiatives in the region have been implemented, I think this kind of trust and relationship has really produced some credible results. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just say before going to other panelists, I got some questions from live stream. So let me introduce these three questions. Question one, can the panel give their thoughts on the needs and challenges of cooperation on public goods, like environmental issues or disaster or disease control? The second question, how can cooperation between sub-regions be enhanced? Okay. The third question, how do you see institutionalization of cooperation happening? Is there the political will for that in each sub-region or in Asia as a whole? Perhaps other panelists may want to discuss these issues also. Mr. Slade, would you like to begin? And then Ms. Abdulkasimova and Mr. Kanao, Mr. Nomoto.
Thank you very much. On the, if I could deal very quickly on the issue of confidence, mutual confidence, and trust. we have, while we have no incidents of mistrust as such, it's probably because we do not have territorial borders and we have no incidents of competition for resources. We've had none so far. However, the global community is now undergoing an exercise of demarcation of maritime borders and with potential for deep sea mining. I expect that there will be issues of some competition because of that. There now is an obvious economic cost for getting your borders correct. We have no issue of competition or clashes on resources. However, we, on the Western Pacific waters, it's acknowledged as one of the healthiest, richest in migratory stocks, and one of the most difficult issues that we had to deal with specific countries which harbor the richest expected collection of tuna, are demanding a bigger price for their waters against other countries where the scientific evidence points to lack of tuna concentration. So it's interesting. While we've had no incidents, I think one can see already looming problems on the tuna stocks. It requires unending talks, and I suppose that is the lesson about trying to deflect or to avert problems is to continue to be open, inclusive, and transparent in the discussion of these potentially difficult issues. Public goods is a good question. I think ever more so in an ever globalizing world. We need to deal with the sharing of public goods, and more so with the response to the impacts on these issues of encroachments and threats to the environment. The fact is, in our world today, very few of us can escape the global consequences of humanity's actions in some other place distant from our particular countries. It does mean that we need to drive a high sensitivity to dealing. I think the Asia-Pacific region is home to very important biodiversity of the globe, a very high sense of responsibility for this, and above all to ensure that we try to implement conservation measures which are clearly marked out in the Convention on Biodiversity, or to try to come to grips with a global response under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change with the threat of global warming. I believe, Mr. Chairman, for us, from the perspective of very small countries, it's the only way that the world community can hope to deal with these large global issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Abdulkasmova.
My take on that is that today we see that the whole world is looking at Asia as a new engine for growth of the world economy. Given the numbers that Mr. Lee today showed, we see that the world will grow at very slow rates during this decade, much slower than it did during the last decade, and we are entering the era of very weak demand from the developed countries. And for many countries which are export-oriented, and Asian economies, most of them are export-oriented, there is a clear need to diversify their export partners. And regional economic cooperation and trade facilitation then becoming necessary and to have sustainable development. In that sense, what I saw today is that in all the speeches by different sub-regional perspectives is that everybody understands that regional integration and trade facilitation is key and it is important. But the pace at which it happens and the pace at which countries are ready to open up to each other and in order not to create losers and winners is very important. And the pace of the reforms and the package of reforms. For example, as I said, the three countries of former Soviet Union, CIS countries, we formed the customs union, and we are moving really fast to single economic space, following the model of European integration. Just in 3 years, we did what maybe Europe did in 15 years. With ASEAN, we should look at more trade facilitation efforts like free trade agreements. For example, the numbers that you mentioned today, there are 130 bilateral FTAs, 257 overall FTAs in Asia. And for example, last year, what we did is that we created only one free trade. We have only one FTA for 12 countries of CIS. So we understand that it is in the mutual interest of everyone. It does not mean that we have to eliminate all trade barriers, because the economies are different level of economic development, and as Dr. Rees said, many economies in this region competing on the similar products. So my point, yes, we need to move to further integration, but we have to understand the pace of these reforms. In terms of public goods, like you said, the green energy, for example, again, take an example of Kazakhstan. This year we are developing a strategy of green economy until 2050, and we initiated at the Rio conference last year. We initiated Green Bridge initiative. It is the initiative actually to bring technologies, to transfer technologies from the more developed countries to developing economies, and create some institutional arrangements to do this transfer, to fund it, because we talk a lot about green energy and renewable energies and other clean energy and energy efficiency and saving, but when it comes, but it is rather expensive exercise. So we need a financing, we need funding, we need technologies, we need people, expertise. It's a whole new sector, it's a whole new industry which needs a lot of investments, and we, as I said, we initiated Green Bridge initiative, and it will be one way for us to add to this issue of public good. And the choice for green energy, as you mentioned in your speech, for example, the need for energy supply in South Asia is huge, and at the same time we have a lot of the countries very close to this region have enormous natural resources like Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, in gas, in oil, and how do we create infrastructure corridors that will help us and benefit all the economies?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kanal, and then Mr. Nemoto. We are running out of time, so we will be short. Thank you.
Well, I think the question of lack of mutual trust and confidence most often comes about SAARC region. people say that there's hardly any mistrust or confidence among countries. If we see the history of South Asia, 70 years ago, the intra-regional trade or trade within the region was more than what ASEAN today has. In SAARC, it declined to around 2% from more than 22%. Whereas the most of the infrastructure, which we are talking about, the trade infrastructure like ports or railways or roads, they more or less remain the same. It's not because the infrastructure became poor, no, they more or less same. The question is that in this last 30 years, the use of suspicion increased, there was lack of trust. I see 4 reasons. One is after 1947, India happened to be the largest country. And as always, all of us are small, so there is always a big country syndrome, so small countries always suspected India's intentions. That is possibly one reason why still today people are not relieved from that lack of trust. And in this last 50 years, in South Asia, countries broke twice. In India broke into 2, and then Pakistan broke into 2. And that takes a long time for these countries to again come together. That's possibly the second reason. It's what I see. Third is, unlike ASEAN, SAARC economies were very protected even until middle of 1990s. Still today, the biggest reform that India is talking about still today is opening up. Opening up, banking sector, opening up, retail market. So it's still there's a protectionist thinking. So which thinks that if we are trading more with the Pakistan perception of the textile industry is that if we trade more with India, we might suffer in terms of textile industry. So that protective sentiment is not only within the government, but also in private sector. Even private sector also thinks that, no, we should open so much in some quarters, in some sectors. Fourth, of course, is the politics. Politicians always, in most countries, see neighbors as the problem. When you project neighbors as the problem, then only you can get political meaning in your country. That might be fourth reason, so this is what. On the question coming from the teleconference, it is public goods. I think South Asia must consider public goods as a matter of concern for all countries because of the huge expected impact of climate change. The Himalayas are melting. There's a threat of flood not only in India but also in Bangladesh. So not only information sharing, but also managing the natural resources for the collective benefit is what South Asia should work on. This is an important area. And already 4 countries in South Asia are working for the tiger conservation. That's a collective joint effort. This is an agenda on disease as well. The bird flu, for example, was a case in which all countries collaborated together in sharing. Sub-region cooperation in other regions may not be that important, but in South Asia, because of the special geographical connection, because 2 of the countries in South Asia are sea-locked. They are not touched with the boundary of other countries, Maldives and Sri Lanka. Afghanistan happens to be slightly far away. As a result, there is a cluster of Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal, which really makes sense for sub-regional economic grouping. So that's important for our reason. Political will, of course, do this.
Thank you. Mr. Negoto.
The first question of the lack of confidence and mutual trust, there's a potentially one in this Chiang Mai framework. That Chiang Mai framework is to explain that there is a short-term liquidity support. In other words, when some country faces financial payment crisis, the other countries or the rest of the countries will lend USD. So there are potential creditors countries and potential borrowing countries. So the demands toward this framework could be different. So we have two measures. One is the surveillance discussion. So the ASEAN Pacific countries have a mutual discussion on particular economies, economic policies, and AMRO office is supposed to present the material. So that is the solution number 1. And solution number 2 is the what we call the CMIM, which is a single agreement among 40 members. So country A may become potential borrowers, but in other occasions could be a potential borrower. So we observed that in 2007, many countries regard themselves as potential creditors, but between 2008 to 2010, some of them regarded themselves as potential borrowers, and now they become the confidence that they regard at this moment many regard them as potential creditors. But this exercise deepened the discussion among the ASEAN plus 3, in my view, and also prevent the moral hazard from this exercise. Just one word for institutionalization. Our office, AMRO, is currently just a non-profit organization in Singapore, so we are not an international organization at all. So in that sense, we are on a trial period. But fortunately, I can report that ASEAN plus 3 finance ministers and central bank governors decided May last year here in Manila that our organization should become the international organization as soon as possible. So, which indicates the political will behind ASEAN plus 3. Thank you very much.